and welcome. Today we're going to crochet a 70s inspired retro case for our sunglasses. My name is Jen and let's crochet. For this project, I'll be using Stylecraft Special DK. I have one skein each of 4 different colors. I'm also using a 3.25mm crochet hook. I have a yarn needle and a pair of scissors handy. I always have a stitch marker or 2 around, and you'll also need a ruler. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'll be referring to my main color as color A, the first stripe as color B, the second as C, and the third as D. I've included the specific colors that I'm using and links for you in the description below. And with that, we're ready to begin crocheting the retro sunglasses case. We're going to start off with color A, which is the main color or the base color of our case, and we're going to start by chaining 37. Always remember that you're going to need to work into this chain, so just make it a relaxed chain, not too tight and not too loose. And here we have our beginning chain with a total of 37 stitches. We're going to be working row 1 into the back bumps of our beginning chain. Now, the tension is going to change a little bit as we crochet our first couple of rows, but your beginning chain, just laying it out relaxed and flat, should be right around 7 inches, give or take a 1/4 of an inch. Otherwise, your completed sunglasses case might be too short for your sunglasses. I would err on the side of longer rather than shorter, even up to 7.5 inches. We are now ready to start row 1. We're going to be continuing with color A, and we'll start, remember, working into the back bumps of our beginning chain by working a single crochet into the second stitch from our hook and into each stitch across. Row 1 will have a total of 36 stitches, and actually every row throughout this entire project will have a total of 36 stitches. The single crochet is the main stitch being used in this project. To create a single crochet, you insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. You can see that I have time traveled a little bit to the end of row 1, and at the end of the row, I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in my loop just so I don't accidentally pull out any stitches, and I'm going to take a moment here to double check my stitch count. Remember, we want a total of 36 stitches now and throughout the entire pattern. Stitch count is going to be important, so you may want to stop and double check your stitch count occasionally as you're working through this tutorial. It's also a good idea to go ahead and measure row 1 just to make sure you have those sunglasses covered. Let's rejoin our hook to our loop and move on to row 2. Row 2 begins with a stacked single crochet. You're going to elongate the loop on your hook just a little bit and then turn your work so that your working yarn is behind the fabric. Then insert your hook into that very first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2. For this project, we'll be using the stacked single crochet instead of a turning chain. To continue with row 2, you're going to be working a single crochet in each stitch across. Rather than show you every single stitch, I do keep the video moving along, but please do feel free to pause if you're working this pattern up in real time. Here we are at row 3, which also begins with that stacked single crochet in the first stitch, and then work a single crochet in each stitch across. I will meet you at the end of row 3 because at the end of this row, we are going to be changing to color B on our last stitch. I thought I'd take this opportunity to really slow the video down and take a closer look at the last stitch. The last stitch of each row is going to be worked into the stacked single crochet from the previous row. The stacked stitches might be a little bit tighter, and they're also slightly facing away from you. So insert your hook and then yarn over and pull up a loop. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our yarn color B, and we're going to use color B for our last yarn over and then pull through those last two loops on our hook. So we have just changed from color A to color B, and now we're ready for rows 4 through 7. Row 4 begins with a stacked single crochet in that very first stitch, and then you're going to work one single crochet in each stitch across. We are going to be following these directions for rows 4 through 7. I also just wanted to put it out there that it might be a good idea to mark the first stitch of each row. I think the one way that you might get thrown off with this pattern is accidentally not seeing that last stitch of each row and having your rows get shorter as you go. So it's always a good idea to mark the first stitch of every row. And also double check that stitch count. Make sure every single row has a total of 36 stitches. I'm now coming up to the end of row 5, where the directions tell us to carry up color A. To do this, before your last yarn over pull through 2, go ahead and take color A and wrap it over your hook. We're just bringing this color along with us on the journey because we're going to be changing back to color A at the end of row 7. Now we'll just turn our work as we normally would to start row 6 with a stacked single crochet. Carry on with the pattern directions, and I'll meet you at the end of row 7. On the last stitch of row 7, we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then drop color B and pick up color A and yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on your hook. Row 8 is worked with color A, and it begins with a stacked single crochet. At this point, you can go ahead and cut off color B, but leave 6 to 8 inches for sewing. Now we can continue row 8 by working a single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. Including that stacked single crochet in the first stitch, we'll have a total of 8 stitches so far worked in row 8. Next, the pattern says to work a spike single crochet in the next stitch directly 5 rows below. This is going to be row 3 or the last row we worked in yarn color A. The easiest way to make sure you're working this stitch in the right place is to go back to that last row worked in color A and counting from the edge, and be careful because you're counting that very edge stitch that's a little bit hidden by carrying up the yarn. From this edge, you will count in 8 stitches, and it's the very next stitch, the 9th stitch from that row, that we're going to be working our spiked single crochet around. Working from front to back, insert your hook around the post of that 9th stitch, yarn over, draw up a loop, and then elongate this loop. Pull on it until it is about 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters long. So we're really going to be careful about the height of our spikes. We don't want the spikes to pull and cinch the fabric too much. You basically want to pull on this loop until your hook is just shy of the height that a regular single crochet in the next stitch would be. You can see that I'm right at 5/8 of an inch here, so I'm going to go ahead and yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on my hook. Then we're going to skip the very next stitch of our current row and single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. We are going to work this repeat a total of 3 times. Let me walk through it with you once again. I'll just finish up these 7 stitches and then we're going to go back to the beginning of the repeat. So our next stitch is that spiked single crochet. We're going to start counting from our previous spiked stitch. We're going to skip over the next 7 stitches from the previous spiked stitch and work our next spiked stitch into the next stitch. Just as before, insert your hook around the post of that stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, elongate that loop until it is 5/8 of an inch tall, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on the hook. Skip the next stitch of the current row and then work 1 single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. We're going to go back to the beginning of the repeat for a 3rd time. I'm going to show you the entire process again in real time to help you get comfortable with this spiked stitch pattern. I'm skipping over the next 7 stitches from the previous spike single crochet, and then around the post of the next stitch, I'm working my next spike single crochet. I truly hope that you're finding this fairly easy to follow, but of course, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask in the comments below. I'm always happy to help or to do any troubleshooting that I possibly can. At the end of that 3rd repeat, we're going to continue row 8 by working 1 more spike single crochet in the same manner. Skip over the next 7 stitches from row 3 and work a spike single crochet in the next stitch. And then you're going to skip the next stitch from the current row and work a single crochet in each of the last 3 stitches. I happened to place a stitch marker in the first stitch from the previous row. I just wanted to illustrate that by marking the first stitch of each row, it can make it a little bit easier to locate that last stitch, that stacked single crochet from the previous row. Let's have a look at row 8. It definitely involved some careful stitch placement. You should have a total of 4 spike single crochet stitches, and this is going to give you 5 fields of that green color in between. There'll be some gentle curves in between the spike stitches, but nothing too tight. Now we can rejoin our crochet hook to that loop and start on row 9. Row 9 begins with a stacked single crochet. Once again, there's no turning chain. You just turn your work so that the working yarn is behind the fabric, and then insert your hook into that very first stitch and make a single crochet. And then you're going to work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. As you're crocheting row 9, you are going to encounter those skipped stitches from the previous row. Please don't let these stitches throw you off in any way. You're simply going to be working 1 single crochet into each stitch across, and some of these stitches are going to be those spike stitches, which might sit a little bit lower than the regular single crochets. In row 9, we're going to be changing to color C on the last stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and meet you at the end of row 9, and we'll work that color change together. Here we are at the end of the row, and to change to color C, you're going to insert your hook into the last stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then drop color A, introduce color C with a yarn over, and then pull this new color through the last 2 loops on your hook. Now we can carry on. Rows 10 through 13 are worked with color C. This is 4 rows of single crochet, just like we worked with color B. You are going to carry up color A at the end of row 11, and we are going to be changing back to color A at the end of row 13. So I'm hopping in here at the end of row 11 and showing you how I'm carrying up color A, yarn over, pull up a loop. Before the last yarn over, I'm going to bring up color A, and then back with color C, I'm working that yarn over and pull through 2. This is our way of just bringing color A along with us because we're going to be changing back to that color at the end of row 13. Speaking of which, here we are at the end of row 13, inserting our hook into that last stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then we drop color C, pick up color A, yarn over, and pull through 2. Row 14 is worked with color A, and it begins with a stacked single crochet in the first stitch. Next, we're going to work 1 single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. This is another spike single crochet row, and it begins with the next stitch. Count 4 stitches in from that row, 5 rows below the last one we worked with yarn color A, and on the 5th stitch you're going to insert your hook front to back around the post, yarn over, pull up a loop, elongate that loop to a total of 5/8 of an inch, and then yarn over and pull through 2. We are going to skip the next stitch of our current row and then work 1 single crochet into each of the next 7 stitches. We are going to repeat this pattern a total of 4 times for row 14. When we get to the next spiked stitch, we're going to count from the previous one, skip over the next 7 stitches, and into the next stitch from that row, 5 rows below, we're going to work the next spiked single crochet. From this point forward, this row is going to be worked just like our last spiked row. I'm going to go ahead and work the entire thing in real time so you can see what I'm doing, and once again work through this row that does require a little bit more counting and a little bit more time and care with your stitch placement. While I'm crocheting, I just wanted to offer a couple of notes that I hope will be helpful. I think one of the easiest ways you can get off on these spiked single crochet rows is at the very beginning by not counting the very first stitch, which is a little bit harder to see on that edge. The spiked single crochet stitches should be fairly vertical or straight up and down. If they're at too great an angle, either to the right or to the left, then you're likely off in your stitch placement in one direction or the other. Also, just in terms of the design, the spiked stitches from this row are going to fall in the center between 2 of the spiked stitches from the previous spiked row. Here we are at the end of that 4th repeat. We've skipped the next stitch of the current row and we're working 1 single crochet into each of the next 7 stitches. And the stitch count should work out perfectly. There should be exactly 7 stitches left in this row. We have just worked very hard on row 14, so let's take a moment and appreciate that work and have a look at our fabric as it looks so far. So you can see that our spikes are quite vertical and the most recent ones are falling just about in the center of our previous spiked row. And can we also just take a second to appreciate how clean this edge is looking? So smooth. I love it. Now we can get back into the rhythm of our single crochet. Row 15 begins with a stacked single crochet in the first stitch and then 1 single crochet in each stitch across. We are going to be changing to color D on our last stitch, and I have time traveled us there, so you insert your hook into that last stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you're going to drop color A, pick up color D, yarn over, and pull it through the last 2 loops on your hook. You can pull on the tails a little bit to tighten any loose threads before we move on. Rows 16 through 19 are worked with color D, and these are 4 rows of single crochet. They each start with that stacked single crochet stitch and then single crochets in each stitch across. You can see that I'm going to go ahead and cut yarn color C, and that way I can just move this skein out of my way and carry on with these rows. Just like we did with the 2 previous colors, we're going to carry up yarn A when we're halfway through at the end of row 17, and before you know it, we're at the end of row 19, and it's time to change back to color A. Here we are on row 20, which is another spiked single crochet row, but it is also an exact repeat of row 8. So you've got this. In fact, you've done this before. So you're going to start with that stacked single crochet in the first stitch and then single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. You're going to work that spike single crochet in the next stitch directly 5 rows below. You will count 8 stitches in from the side and work that spiked single crochet around the post of the 9th stitch. Then you'll skip the next stitch in your current row and single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. You're going to do this repeating pattern 3 times. Remember to make those spiked single crochet stitches 5/8 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters long. The first spiked single crochet is always the hardest because you're counting in from the edge. It's a little harder to identify that very first stitch. It's a little bit hiding underneath the stacked single crochet. But once you've done your first one, all of the subsequent ones are a lot easier. You're just going to be skipping over the next 7 stitches and working your next spike stitch in the next stitch. Once again, I'm not doing any time traveling on these spiked single crochet rows. I'm doing the entire row for you just because I know these are a little bit more challenging and I really want you to get through these successfully. After you complete the 3rd repeat, row 20 continues by working a spiked single crochet in the next stitch directly 5 rows below, just as you have been doing, and then you're going to skip the next stitch of the current row and work 1 single crochet in each of the last 3 stitches. And with that last stitch complete, let's go ahead and have a look at our fabric. We are almost halfway through our retro sunglasses case project, and I hope you're enjoying the process. For row 21, we're going to work a stacked single crochet in the first stitch, and then we're going to single crochet in each stitch across. This time, we are not going to be changing colors at the end of this row. At the end of row 21, I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker in my loop just so I don't accidentally pull out any stitches. And I'd like us to pause and do a little bit of yarn maintenance. One edge of our fabric is clean, and this is going to be the opening of our case. The other edge is where we have all of our loose ends, and you'll notice that there are 3 that are sort of sitting on the top of the fabric in the middle of these color fields. I would like us to take a moment right now and weave in these 3 loose ends. So we're only weaving in 3, and we're only weaving in the 3 that are both a color and right now facing the right side of our work. You can see that the very first step I make here is to insert my needle through the fabric and pass this thread back to the wrong side of the work. And then I'm going to weave in this loose end on the wrong side of the fabric. I always make 3 passes for a very secure hold, and then I can cut off the excess yarn and repeat this process for the other 2 colors. We're going to keep the rest of these loose ends for now. We're going to be using these later to sew our final seam. I'm going to dive right back into our tutorial, but please remember to always take a break when you need one. Do your wrist exercises, stretch those fingers. We want our minds and our bodies to be relaxed as we do this craft that we love. For rows 22 through 25, we're actually crocheting the part of our sunglasses case that will become the fold. These are simply 4 rows of single crochet that each begin with that stacked single crochet stitch. Because these are straightforward, I have jumped ahead to the end of row 25, and I just want to do a little bit of a close-up to help you count your rows if that's something you find challenging. This row of color A with that little horizontal bar is row 20, and then 21. The next bar is 22, then 23. The next horizontal bar is 24, and then that last row is row 25. Now it's time to work on the second half of your case. These are rows 26 through 45, and to do this, we are going to repeat rows 2 through 21 in that order or respectively. The only thing that we're going to do differently is we're going to reverse the order of the colors. Instead of B, C, D, we're going to work D, C, B because we want the end rows of our colors to match up on the edge of our case. You can rewind and follow the pattern directions for rows 2 through 21 on the video, and I have included timestamps to make those easy to find. I have also included the written directions for rows 26 through 45 in the description below, as well as in the following 3 frames. Please continue in whichever way is the most comfortable for you, whether it's rewinding and using the video or simply pausing the frames and following the written directions. At the end of row 45, here is our fabric. We have our first row, and then we have our 3 colors, B, and then C and D. And then I left you to do the other half on your own. It started with these 2 rows of color A, and then the 3 fields in reverse, D, C, and B. When we fold the fabric in half, you can see that by reversing the colors on the second half, it means that these color stripes are matching up perfectly on the ends. Before we move on, let's weave in the loose ends of colors D, C, and B, just the ends that are in the middle of their color field and facing the right side of the fabric. Once again, use your needle to thread them through to the wrong side of the fabric, weave in these loose ends, and then trim off any excess. Save the remaining loose ends. We're going to be using them very soon for sewing. Once you're done, you can see that this edge of the fabric now has 7 loose ends, the beginning tail, and 6 colored threads. We are almost there. We have just a couple more rows to crochet before we're ready to sew up this project. For row 46, we are continuing with color A, and we're working 1 more row of single crochet. You'll begin by working a stacked single crochet in the first stitch, and then 1 single crochet in each stitch across. Here we are coming to the end of row 46, and with that last single crochet, we're going to fold our fabric. You want to fold your fabric lengthwise. We are making a sunglass case, so you want it to be long and narrow. The right sides will be facing each other, and our stripes of color will be lining up on the short sides. we're going to join the long sides together with one more row of single crochet. So we're working through both edges of the fabric from rows 1 and 46, and we're going to still work a stacked single crochet in the corresponding first stitches of both layers of fabric. I work this stitch once and then I take it out and I redo the stitch because it's nice if this first stitch is a little bit more on the tight side. We don't want any loose threads bulging out on the right side of our work when we turn our case right side out. Now that I'm happy with that first stitch, I'm going to continue on with row 47, working a single crochet into each stitch. Once again, we're working through both sides of the fabric in corresponding stitches. Here we are working the last couple of stitches for row 47. Sometimes it takes an extra second to really locate that hole for those stacked stitches, but before you know it, we're done. We can cut our working yarn, leaving a nice long tail for sewing, and then I'm just going to pull that cut tail through the final loop and pull it closed. We have now completed all of the crocheting for our retro sunglasses case. We've got this nice seam and we're ready to stitch the seam on the short side. You may notice that the two colored threads that we saved are each on the ends of their color field, making it really easy to thread them onto our yarn needle, whip stitch across that color, and then tie it to the other loose end. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that these stripes are matching up as perfectly as I can get them. And then I'm just going to simply whip stitch, working around the last stitch in each of these rows. And remember, there are 4 rows of each color, so I'm going to make at least 4 whip stitches going through the ends of each of these rows. I'm going to go ahead and put in one more stitch for good measure, really lining up the edges of this green color. You can flip over your work and make sure you're happy with your nice, neat seam. And now I'm going to go ahead and tie these 2 loose ends together using a square knot. I'm going to go right over left and then left over right, and then I'm going to repeat once for good measure. You could weave in these loose ends if you wanted to. These are going to be on the inside of your sunglasses case, and so no one will ever see these little knots, but that is entirely up to you. I'm going to repeat what I just did for color B, for colors C and D. Once I have finished sewing all of the colors together, I'm going to use the ending tail to whip stitch all of the fields of color A. In other words, everywhere the brown ends meet the brown ends. I'll start by doing a few stitches, starting with the corner and working across these end rows. When I get to color B, I'm just going to use the needle and go under a few threads to carry color A to the next rows that contain color A, which are just a couple rows in between each color. I'm going to whip stitch over these couple of rows, and then I'll weave through the next color and then whip stitch over the next couple of rows. So I'm just going to be carrying a color A across and whip stitching anytime I reach a point where there are end rows of color A. Here I am reaching the other end of this edge. I'll probably put an extra stitch in the corner just because corners do tend to receive a little more stress. Once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and weave in these loose ends, both the beginning and ending tails of color A. If I had cut this tail long enough, I could have worked my way back across if I had wanted to, and then tie it with a square knot to the beginning tail of color A. I just didn't happen to cut my thread quite long enough, so I ended up needing to weave in both of these tails. If you like, just for a little added insurance, you can add a drop of a clear craft glue or a product like Fray Check or No Fray to each of your square knots, just to ensure that these knots are going to stay in place. Now we can turn our completed retro sunglasses case right side out and admire our finished project. I love how perfectly straight the edges are on the open side of the case, and this is really why I used those stacked single crochets. They just make for a very clean edge. Hey, if you're still here, can I just say that I'm so grateful that you decided to watch this video today. I post crochet tutorials on Tuesdays, and I would love it if you'd hit like and subscribe. That way you'll never miss a new crochet pattern, and I'll get a boost of inspiration just by knowing you're here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.